slight tweak or change to the calendar. We are here today to really take a final look at these calendars. I want to share with you some data that maybe you weren't aware of when we were starting this process. Some of this data is actually new for me. And so I want to spend some time taking a look at this data because we want to make sure that the calendars that we design are responsive to the needs of our students. We want to make sure that how we build out our year is designed in a very intentional way so that we can maximize the learning opportunities for our students. And so you've got 3 draft calendars that were sent to you, but again, they're draft calendars, so we can have any kind of discussion that we need to around those. So what I'll do is give you a second just to take a look at the data that's on the screen. I'll make it a little bit smaller. Let me know if it gets too small.
Oh yeah, you can't make it smaller.
Don't make it smaller.
Okay, don't make it smaller. I'll just move the cursor then. So here we're talking about EOCs. In comparison, North Carolina and the state. And this is grade level proficient. Here are EOGs.
So Sean, you may need to make it even bigger.
Say even bigger?
Yeah.
No problem. It's the power of technology. I can do all of that. And these are the outcomes from last year. So we know what we're looking at. Okay? I would encourage you to pay really close attention to EOCs. Math 1 EOC. 26.2%. And then finally, these are other indicators of performance. Okay, any questions about this data? I know this is, for folks in the room, of course, school folks, this is not new data for you. I may look a little different for your individual scores, probably not district scores. But any questions about this data per se? Okay? And then another data set. So this is comparative data. So we're looking at performance 18-19 school year to the 20-21 school year. And remember, 18-19 was Florence. I want to say that school year we had 181 or either 182 days built into the calendar. And we ended up losing, of course, quite a few and then building back some into that. And I want to say we ended with maybe 175, 177 days. That was 18-19. So here are your EOC subjects. And then your other school measures. And you'll even take note, there were a couple of places where we actually saw an increase in Math 3, and then I think also in work keys. So our slight increase. And so the conversation today really is about As you know, the calendar that we finalized in terms of what we were looking to recommend to the board has fewer school days than any other calendar that we proposed. And that has come as a result, and I'm talking specifically about the traditional calendars. If you look at our year-round calendar, our 2 early college calendars, our restart calendars, the number of days proposed within those calendars are comparable to prior schedules. So we're not talking about those calendars, we're talking about the traditional. And we understand the limitations around that are when we can start. So the earliest we can start is the Monday closest to August 26th. And so where that falls, it limits us to the earliest start being August 29th. And so, given the outcomes that we have, the question really is, knowing the gaps, knowing the unfinished learning, knowing the decrease in the overall proficiency of students, is what we want to propose to the board to approve a calendar that includes less instructional days than any other calendar that we've offered. And just another point of comparison, in the data you saw that specifically 8th grade math, we have about 36.7% students showing proficient in 8th grade math. And that proficiency is derived of those students who are proficient in Math 1, as well as those students who are proficient in Math 8. If we pull out just our Math 8 level of proficiency, what do you think that is? Just Math 8. 17%. So that means, in essence, that we sent about 87% of our 8th grade students, those who did not take Math 1, to 9th grade last year, not being proficient in Math 8. But yet still, the calendars we're proposing have less instructional days. And so again, I really want us to feel comfortable with this if this ends up being the proposal that we're making. So, just by the numbers, and thank you, Elizabeth, for these numbers, of the 1,370 8th graders that took Math 8, only 233 were proficient. And so we are experiencing the impact of that in 9th grade now, specifically in Math 1. But there are going to be some long-term impacts of that. And again, how do we respond to that? In the words of Julie Farnham, how do we remove the barriers for those students? And just really thinking and reflecting on these calendars, I don't know that reducing the number of instructional days is going to get us where we need to be. Another couple of points, and then I'll definitely yield the floor, are looking at our summer learning. So a response surely could be building out summer learning programs to help recoup this lost learning. But our past summer learning program, if we look at the impact specifically for 3rd grade, because that's the data that the state captures, less than 5% of the students that attended ended up being proficient at the end of summer learning. So after 6 additional weeks of instruction in the summer learning program, 150 hours of instruction, we had less than 5% of students to show proficient. And for our 1st graders and 2nd graders, again, less than 5% showed proficient, less than 5% of those who attended showed proficiency after the program. So we're actually putting together a committee now to really look at being more innovative in our summer learning. But right now, we know that it's not having the impact that we would want it to have. So those are just a couple of data sets. The other thing I'll share with you is our graduation rate. As a district, we fall 42nd within the state. In comparison to large districts, out of the 12, we're 7th. In our region, we're 4th. And for districts that are comparable in our size, we fall 4th. But I'll also say I'm having some conversations very early on with a lot of folks in the high school who really have significant concerns about students being able to acquire the credits to graduate without looking at reducing the electives that are required. So there are a lot of things that go into this conversation. And so as I said, I'm going to kind of put it out there, and then I'm going to yield the floor for discussion. Welcome any thoughts, any ideas in regards to this.
Quick question, Dr. Smith.
Yes.
And forgive me if you said this. Is draft 3 where we left it? Is that it after the last meeting? Okay. So
No.
Okay. Okay. So these are all 3 totally different. Okay.
Yeah. So I guess the big question is, if we're in agreement that we need to look at increasing the number of instructional days, and if we're in agreement, then I think the next question becomes how. So would welcome conversation, discussion about if folks see the need. And again, we would be at the number of days that we had last year if not for where school had to start. I don't think there was any intentionality of removing days. It was just where we found ourselves in terms of a forced start, where our school year had to start. So I'd love to hear discussion, thoughts about the start of this increasing or not increasing the number of instructional days in the current calendar.
I believe from our last conversation, the first semester was already slighted compared to the second semester. So the burden is already on first semester, but I'm not sure what wiggle room there is.
So again, I think, so let me make an assumption. I'm assuming everyone in the room would be agreeable to look at the possibility of adding additional instructional days. All right, thank you. So making that assumption and having it affirmed by the head nods in the room, then I think it's really important that we still end first semester in December. I do. And the reason I do is because of the value add for our high school students who are in career and college promise and aligning with the community college courses. I think that's really important, and I don't think we want to lose that. I think the heavy lift is going to be with high schools to strategically plan their first semesters. I think that's going to be the challenge for high schools. They're going to have to be even more strategic in what they do for first semester. The other thing is for our students who are graduating, we could, because I think this is allowable, but of course I would want to check and come back with the primary source, we could still look at our seniors graduating prior to the end of the school year. So they don't have to wait to that very last day in order for them to graduate. I think that's the flexibility we have because we see it within our early colleges. So we can give flexibility to our seniors. But what this would afford us is really to think creatively in that second semester about how to make sure that we have scheduled students in our high schools and program for our middle school and design instruction for our elementary schools in such a way that we respond to what we already know. We know that there is a gap. We know that there is a deficit. So this allows us that additional flexibility in the second semester to build for that. Because again, high school, you have your EOCs first semester, second semester for so many of your courses. But for middle school and elementary, it's year long. It can look very different. The pacing could be flexible into how we do that. So I do see a lot of opportunity there. Yes, sir.
Just a question, and I'm just looking at Mary Beals because you're the only one of the ones I've actually talked to in person. Just a pivot thought. Is it as important to end when the community college ends in the fall semester? Because I understand career and college promise. Isn't it more important to make sure it's ended before their second semester starts? Because the community college calendar is way shorter than ours. I mean, I don't think the question is that we have to end when they end. We just have to have ended before they begin their second semester, correct?
Yes.
So really that extension into January isn't necessarily to match the ending of the community college calendar, because they usually start, June 13th, January 13th, they start. So I think the question is making sure that first semester is over by that date is more important than ending when they end. Just my thought or question.
Mm-hmm.
I know with high schools, everybody likes it ending before Christmas because that way we have time during the break if we have to readjust schedules, that kind of thing. Most of us will come in and work sometimes during the holidays to make sure our schedules are right, and the kids don't have to come back and take exams after Christmas and then jump into another semester.
And I think we all know that, but I don't think the calendar law does.
Right.
Right. So that's the question I have, is that there's never anything that's going to be convenient for adults and good for kids at the same time. My only concern is if you extend the spring semester at the sacrifice of the fall semester, there's almost an inequity in hours of instruction that I wonder when that number gets too big to surmount, right? Because if I was a parent and my kid had biology in the fall and my other kid had biology in the spring, I'd be feeling some kind of way about 30 hours or more of instructional difference between the semesters.
Right, and I understand that is an issue.
Yes.
Just from like a student perspective, just having more days doesn't necessarily equate to productivity, I think is important to note, because there were a lot of times like we would be in class and have a full instructional day and I gained nothing from my entire day. And I did the assignments, and I feel like we all know the term busy work, but there are a lot of days in the school year where you just have busy work and you gain nothing from that instructional day. And it's just like, what did I even do today? Like, I don't know, Mom. Like, I can't really tell you much. I don't know what just happened. So I do understand that perspective, but I also just wanted to throw that in the loop when considering adding additional days, is that it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to bump up our scores, because how is it being used? We can't know that for certain. Just wanted to.
Well, no, and I think that's a very important perspective, and I think that perspective is what allowed us to transition from a district that was steadfast with the 185 to a district that recognized there was a need for additional professional development days for teachers, and we were able to transition to 177 or 173. I think the challenge this year is, well, with the upcoming year, is because simply, Dr. Burns, you spoke to this, because the calendar law doesn't recognize it, we have a false start of the 29th as opposed to being able to just start 1 week in advance. But your point is very, very well taken. Very unfortunate, but very, very well taken. Yes, yes.
How many days are in each semester with the,
So where we were before, the days were, I want to say 78, and maybe 89, something like that. And so this would definitely offer an even greater shift to that. But again, you don't want to, in my opinion, compact that second semester in the same way that we compacted the first. I think the only way to get balance would be to extend the first semester beyond the December break, which we surely can look at as well.
I will share, I just looked up the Cape Fear Community College calendar, and they start around the 6th.
The
of January.
6th? Okay.
So of course, we don't know that more instructional time delivers stronger results. We've got to have high quality instruction going on. That point's amazing. We also don't want to have that imbalance from first and second semester. So again, I think that goes back to what you were saying with strategic scheduling, making sure that we know who's taking which classes in the fall and setting them up for success. The other part of the concern, so much of this is outside of our control, and we're almost forced to either make a decision that is not going to really work out well for our kids, or on the other side of that, make a different decision that isn't going to work out well for our kids. So the problem with that, the community college calendar starting so soon, do we know what UNCW is? They're probably a week later, right? Week and a half.
January 2nd, I think, is when my first day back is, or it's January 9th, but it's like January.
Okay, so in the first 2 weeks,
Yes,
though.
first.
Okay, so they're similar then. So that's going to be an issue. Having kids come back from having a 2-week break and then taking their exams, that's also a problem. We can't start any sooner. So, I certainly don't think the answer is less days, because we know less time is not a good answer either. It just seems like we're gonna have to push it, and we're not gonna be able to match up the semesters, because I don't think that's gonna be an option for us.
No, we obviously have students at the community college who have their own calendar. We have students taking IB classes, we have students taking AP classes, those aren't the concern either. You have these students who are taking career and college promise where they're taking community college classes within the traditional high school setting, correct?
Yes.
Do we have a litmus test on how many kids we're talking about?
I remember at one of our last meetings, our board representative who was here said that if you counted all the kids who participated at Cape Fear, it would be larger than our high schools, one of our high schools. So to me, that would mean more than 2,000 children.
Because that is a question as well, is how many students is this affecting? And when I was a high school principal, the same thing happened as you were racing. We actually had, you had to store kids somewhere right before Christmas because community college was done.
Mm-hmm.
You still had school, they still had to come to school because it was third period or something weird like that, so you still had that issue. And then we were racing to get them done in January. My only concern is I just don't know is that the rules because for the next 4 or 5 years, we're stuck starting really late because the Monday closest to the 26th is going to be that 28th or 27th or 29th. I wonder if the dream of ending before Christmas is a realistic one. That's just, it's a terrible question, but that's a question.
Yeah. I think that echoes what I was saying.
Okay.
And when we give exams, it takes the whole school, teacher-wise, to give the exam, so that's, I hate to say it, that's another week that's lost.
And you can't come in you can't come back January 3rd and fall into exams. You need to have that time for review before that. So that would put exams January 9th to the 13th, arguably.
Yep.
And do you yield better results with less instruction and an exam closer to the most recent instruction in December, or do you yield better results with more days, but the exam being delayed after a 2-week break?
I think the only other concern to raise is that that's going to make a long haul through September and October. You know, and speaking from the person that deals with teachers when they hit their critical mass, that's a critical mass waiting to happen.
That's a pacing nightmare.
But you don't have a choice, because if you want to end before Christmas, you don't have any time to lose. Certainly not either. So it's are we playing the short game or the long game, I think is the question.
Yes.
Just from a student aspect, because I definitely can't speak from a teacher aspect, kids would prefer to end before Christmas than get a break during that long haul, because we complain heavily about it, but, oh wait, I think I've said this before, I might be a broken record, but it is more productive use of your time when you have a long duration to really sit down, reflect, like get yourself together, rather than a day where you're just sitting there like, let me just use it however I feel like really quickly, because what can you really do with 24 hours? For a teacher, it's completely different, but for a student, there's not really much you can do that's going to bring you back into the classroom feeling refreshed in comparison to having that really nice break and then coming back spring semester like, here we go again, but like I've had some time to get my life together.
Okay, guys, all great discussion. I think the question now on the floor is whether or not we end before the December break that first semester, or whether we extend that into January. And I know that we're kind of in different places with that. So I think we probably need to take a vote on that.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Going back to the discussion a few years ago when we decided to go to the semester, or the first semester ending in December, we looked at the year before the 17-18 data as compared to the 18-19 data, where 18-19 was disrupted by Florence and that semester was a little shorter. I think, Dr. Smith, at that point, we saw that shorter days that didn't necessarily have a direct outcome on EOC scores. So that's why we made the decision at that time to say, hey, let's finish this in December. So I'm sort of going back to that same question. If we decided then that, hey, we were able to finish in December, then it didn't have an adverse effect, I would then perhaps argue that that still would be the case. I don't know.
So with Florence, our outcomes were very comparable to the previous year on the aggregate. But when you disaggregate the students that did not perform as well are those students who did not have very sustainable support systems. And we saw that, across many different aspects of our lives. Economics, housing, employment, that type of thing. So, as an overall district, our outcomes, for the most part, maintain. But students who had challenges in terms of that sustainable support system did not experience them the same kinds of way. But you are definitely correct in your recollection we did look at those outcomes, and that's when we felt much more comfortable making this transition. And, you know, again, I think we're at this point having this conversation today because of where the 26th falls. You know, because again, as you recall, because you've been on the committee a while, this was not the discussion that we had last year. We, you know, this would be our second year running, this current year, our second year running in terms of this calendar.
I think one of the difficulties here is we're trying to project a year out, and we don't know the result from this year. We're gonna rebound. I mean, we are.
Yeah.
We are. We just don't know to what extent.
Yes.
And so we're trying to make a decision based on, obviously, data we don't have.
Yeah. And every year since has been very, very different.
Right, the data that we do have is not
Yes.
reflective of this calendar. It is
Right.
reflective of so many things beyond our
Yes,
control.
there's no, yeah, there's no consistent, and then of course, then there's a gap year for which we have no data, but anyway. So yeah, so again, I really appreciate the discussion. I think we are now at a point where we, should take a vote, I think what what we're voting on is whether we, maintain the, semester ending, prior to the December holiday, or if we're moving into January for that end of that first semester. Okay? So, Dr. Barnes, if we could start with you, if you're in favor of moving away, well, maintaining first semester ending by December, or first semester ending after December? And then we're just going to go all the way around.
Thank you. I didn't know if I was going to be considered a voting member or not, so I was trying to be super quiet. I don't think it's logistically feasible,
Okay.
so no.
Okay? Ms. Small?
Same thing, I'm the least qualified person to have an opinion on, you know, how many
I
instructional
didn't
days.
say that.
No, I'm just saying, I'm saying it, because you've been a principal, and I'm the only non-educator in the room, and
Oh,
so.
you educate me every time I talk to you.
I
Right,
know,
me
but to be fair, from a numbers perspective, I want to see it more even, but I hear what everybody's saying, so I don't want my vote to count as much as everybody else's, but I wish it
Okay,
was
we
more.
will give you a half vote.
I wish
We'll give you a half
half point, I'd like it a little more balanced.
Okay?
Thank you.
All right. Dr. Silver?
I am in favor of ending in December.
Okay. Ms. Ryan?
I don't think we can end in December.
All right, thank you. Ms. Brinson?
I'm torn.
Torn.
I would agree.
I'm
Torn.
torn because
It's a
I
torn
really
no
feel
for
like
me.
we need to not end in December, but I also know that to do it out, we're talking, it is going to affect the Cape Fear and the UNCW schedule, so it's going to affect a large group of students. I'd like to know the number of students that is. And see, I'm also thinking about the K-8 students, you know, are we ending before Memorial Day, or is that another conversation?
So if more likely than not, we would not end before Memorial Day.
I mean, because even though, I mean, for high school, the numbers each semester matter, but for K-8, it doesn't matter. There's just
For
additional days
K-5, it definitely doesn't.
to get, you know, kids caught up. I mean, that's 11 days. That's a lot of days. I don't see how we can end in December. I think it needs to go
All right.
beyond.
Dr. Murray?
I'm in favor of ending in December.
Okay. Mia?
Ending in December.
Thank you.
Yeah, K-5, it really doesn't impact us, but I have to think about my colleagues over here, and I'm in favor of ending in December.
Okay.
December.
December. As a parent of a high schooler, it has benefited to end in December with Cape Fear classes, so I would support that.
December.
All right, so the vote is, unless I can't count, 8 to end in December and 4 not to. All right? So,
You didn't vote.
I'm facilitating. I'm facilitating the process. I would be if we were an even number vote, then I would be the tiebreaker.
Well, I am curious what your opinion on it is, though.
It definitely is a struggle, but what I'll say is I defer to the secondary schools because they're gonna have to carry the weight. And if they're gonna have to carry the weight of this water and they're willing to, then I defer to our secondary schools. And so my vote would be to end prior to the December break. Because, you know, the parents aren't gonna be calling me. Working through the schedules is not gonna come on my desk. It's all gonna fall with our secondary principals.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then as our elementary principal shared, you know, they can adjust their pacing to do the things that they need to do regardless.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a high school burden, definitely.
Yes.
So would there be any benefit, just because I'm just curious, and I know there've been discussion about this, would there be any benefit in, so if the semester couldn't line up, because quite honestly, calendar law doesn't give us that opportunity in a great way. I mean, I get it gives us the opportunity by kind of offsetting the semesters. But if we built in, you know, thinking about how tough things are right now, how tough things are, you know, kind of for students and for staff, if we built in good, strong breaks between the 9 weeks where it could be a break, you know, a break of a day or two for students, a day or two for planning, professional development for staff, is that a better spot? I get that we're talking about it's difficult to turn over at the semester. And, you know, my experience at the high school has been as an AP, so I was a part of that whole scheduling piece, and that was definitely the struggle. But if we had other things that were benefiting in our calendar, would that be helpful? Just throwing that out. Probably muddy in the water, but just, you know, I'm not shy.
Yeah. I think that would be important. Yes. Yeah. All right. So we've now made the decision that we're going to be committed to ending that first semester before the December break. And we've also made the decision that we're going to extend that school year because we want to make sure this calendar is responsive to the instructional needs of our students, given what we know about the learners that we're supporting. And so now we need to decide where those adjustments occur on that first semester. So let me pull up those calendars.
So we're also all clear on the unintended consequence of that September, October, November straight shot without.
We're very clear of that this year.
We're living it.
That's why,
Right,
if
which
you
is
see,
why.
Right, but do we want to do it again?
well, that's why if you see October 24th has a half day.
And that was very intentional for that
That
reason.
was the most that we were, I think, willing to sacrifice for our high school teachers.
Well, and can I throw something out there real quick while we're on the subject of early release days? And again, this is partially because I'm living it right now. One of the conversations that has come out of meeting with teachers to talk to them about this letters training, which entails a total of 157 hours for teachers. It is a lot. Teachers continue to say, can we not go back to early release days? Can we not go back to early release days? And I do think that, you know, sometimes the perception is that early release days are not beneficial or as beneficial as they could be. What I'm hearing from teachers is they are begging for it right now. And I know it counts as a student day. I fully understand it's not the quality of instruction in an early release day that you're going to get in a full day. But at the same time, until we can give our teachers what they need to do their job well, which is time, we are not going to get quality instruction out of them. And so I do feel very passionate about that right now because of the day I've had in talking about letters training with teachers. But I don't know. And I'm not sure even in what context I'm throwing this on the table. I feel about it just as strongly this year as I will next year. I just had to, so I can sleep tonight. I had to throw that out there.
Well, and I appreciate that, and we are working to make adjustments in our letter schedule so that it is more palatable for teachers. We were given really an impossible schedule this year, and so we're stepping away from that. And that's why there's the intentionality on the front end of the number of teacher workdays, so that will be time given to teachers for that professional development. So any new curriculum, any new letters training, that's where that time is going to come in too. So really removing as much of the burden from teachers this year for letters and shifting it to those work days. And, you know, as we had the conversation, and many of you probably aren't aware, the contract for letters should have been approved in July. And so our teachers should have been able to take advantage of the work days on the front end of this year, and they were not able to. And so all of that was shifted backwards. And so now we are moving that to the front end of next year to relieve that burden on teachers.
So the schedule that we received at the principal meeting last week is going to be revised as far as what is required of them this year?
So let me talk to you
Okay,
about
that's
that
fine,
after this meeting, because I'll need to pull that up.
Okay.
Okay? All right, so again, you know, from my perspective, you know, I believe that ending the school year before the December break definitely does not come without consequences. But I believe very strongly that there are greater benefits for our students that we adhere to that calendar. But also understanding that we need to make sure that we're providing enough instructional days, at least comparable to what we have this year, in order to support our students and to make sure that there's the opportunity for us to design and deliver that instruction effectively. So you've got 3 draft calendars. I think everyone has that at their desk. And so if you'll take a look at those calendars, and where we can start is maybe the calendar that has the greatest amount of preference. So draft 3, draft 4, and draft 5.
So are the first semesters the same in all 3 drafts? It's the second semesters that we're looking at?
Yes.
Dr.
Yes.
Can you clarify what you meant by graduation to be at a different time?
So we can look at whether the state will allow us to graduate our seniors, for us to conduct graduation ceremonies prior to the end of the school year. So within that last week, if we had graduation ceremonies that occurred on Wednesday, Thursday, you know, Tuesday of that week. So it wouldn't have to be that very last day, as we have historically done it in this district on that Saturday.
Because you got it, I think, on all the calendars on June 10th.
Yes.
And teachers are finished like on the 7th. And you have, I mean, it takes most of the people to work it.
So yeah, so these again are just simply drafts. So
Okay.
we can have that conversation and we'll verify to make sure that we can do that.
Okay.
Can I ask a clarifying question about the October 24th? I see that that's on all 3 of the calendars, and appreciate that the thought that this would offer a little bit of, I guess, a little bit of a break, a little bit of support for teachers. that this is listed as a half day, but not a PD day, just a half day. And I'm guessing the logic on it being a half day is so that it still counts as a student day, but then offers a break, right?
So the reason it was listed as a half day, and where it's positioned, let me double check, is because it follows the end of the grading period. And so teachers were looking at this not exclusively for professional development, but to support closing out the grading period. So entering grades, that type of thing.
But instead of having it as a work day to do those things, we're trying to keep days so we can preserve the first semester, right?
So are you talking about instead of it being a full workday?
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
And I'm saying even a full work day, 1 or 2, you know, because again, my thought would be to give some time in there. Okay.
Okay, so let's take and again, we can go back to first semester if we need to. So let's take a look at draft 3, 4, and 5. So just seeing where we have a preference to begin. For those who have a preference for draft 3, if you don't mind just raising your hand.
Can I ask one question first? I'm sorry. I'm just trying to see where we added the student days. So it looks like we added days, in that, the 4 extra days at the end. But that, draft 3 has 1 extra work day. Is that, I'm just trying to make sure I've seen all the differences.
1 and 3.
So draft 3, we removed 5 work days
Yeah,
from the
have
back
the
end
10th,
of the calendar,
the Easter Monday.
and the end date is for June the 2nd. Draft 4, we removed April the 10th as an undesignated work day. We changed that to a student day, and we ended the school year as of June the 2nd. We removed 5 work days from the back end of the calendar. Draft 5, we changed February 13th to a designated work day instead of an undesignated work day. We made February 14th student day. The end date for the school year is June the 2nd, and we removed 5 work days from the back end of the calendar.
I was just trying to see, like, because I don't have the old calendars with me, how many days did we add in all of them?
So for student days, 5.
5 in either one. Okay.
So where we were moving toward was to have it comparable with the number of student days we have this year.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So for those who have a preference for draft 3, if you don't mind, show of hands.
Can I change? Can I ask?
Well, and we're not voting on the calendar. This is just where we're going to start the conversation. Yes.
The question, does anybody have a preference for draft 4? Only reason there is, I had a lot of feedback about the Monday, April 10th, after the Easter Monday, I guess it would be.
Well, I was going to go through and get everybody to
I
vote
know.
whatever they have the preference for. That's where we'll start, as opposed to going through one that nobody cares
Okay.
about. So I'm thinking no one has a preference for draft 3. So do I have?
Well, no,
I don't know.
Okay. So
I'm trying to eliminate draft 4.
okay. All right. So preference for draft 3. So 1, 2, 3.
How many votes
Okay.
did we get?
We get 1. So this is just where the conversation begins. Your preference in beginning the conversation would be with draft 3.
Okay.
So show of hands high if you don't mind. Preference for draft 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 6. Preference for draft 4. 1. Okay. Preference for draft 5.
Can you give us a student count on each one real quick? How many
Yeah,
student
I
days-
need more information. I didn't give you a hand raise.
Like, how many student days are there in draft 3, draft 4, and draft 5?
So in draft 3, 172, draft 4, 173, draft 5, 173. And that doesn't mean that we can't add additional days. Again, it's just a draft. We surely can make changes there.
I'm gonna throw something out there. What if a half day doesn't fly? Do we still want to keep it the way it is?
Are you talking about on the 24th?
Yeah, I'm still back to that.
So again, as the calendar committee, we can surely make a recommendation for a change. So we can definitely go back to first semester as well. Yes.
Right,
right.
I'm kind of asking the table.
Say again?
I mean, I'm asking, like, I know we can revisit it. I'm just saying, what are our thoughts on that? Because I'm not sure that's gonna fly, just being honest. Because I think it, and I hear the need, but I think it kind of sounds like we're wanting to have enough of a day to count it as a day, but we want to have also enough of time to give teachers a break. I hear that.
It's not a break. It's not a break.
And
Right,
and
well-
it's also not a day, it's just hours.
It's neat, right.
Right.
Well, and
So
what
it sounds like it's not really an effective student day at a half day.
Well, and what
Is
I'll
it?
say is, we discussed this one last time, and actually, we took a vote on that one as well. And it
Okay.
was definitely a split vote, but since we're revisiting, we surely can vote on that again. That's not a problem at all.
Well, and I might be the only one just kind of harping on it, so.
No.
I get that.
No, I mean, there are a good number of people that voted for it. Yes, ma'am.
Oh, can I just comment on the October 24th really quick?
Yes, please.
Just because, again, I can only speak as a student, but I really do think that it's the best of both worlds because teachers are able to get that couple of extra hours to grade, which may not seem like a lot, but it can actually mean a lot for a teacher to be able to get as much of their grading done at school and then be able to rest and go home rather than bringing that with them. And then with students, it's like a built-in busy work day, which I know sounds like a really awful thing to say, but the things that you might not necessarily need an entire instructional day to get done, that's typically what teachers have done on half days, which is really nice rather than doing that on a full day because it just feels like you're wasting your time. And again, students get a break. So students are getting a break, teachers are getting the time they need or as much time as we can possibly give them to work on grading. I think it's the best of both worlds, but again, only a student.
Well, no, please don't say that.
Yeah.
You are a great
It's a great perspective. And when I said, and I know it's not a break because they get to leave. They've got all this, I'm advocating for more time in between. I'm saying that a half day isn't enough. I'm saying a break from supervising students to get the other things done. And I'm an advocate for putting a little more time in to do that thoughtful work, and even if there's an opportunity for professional development in the meantime. I don't think we give enough professional development time, and I think we go and we hit it hard, and it's really hard to maintain that tenacity and that rigor.
Yeah.
Just
Well, I don't think anybody in here will disagree. I think the challenge is really having that perfect solution.
yeah.
But, I appreciate your perspective, and definitely me, I appreciate yours as well. I don't know what we were thinking, and when we were creating these calendars before, and didn't have students as part of it.
Well, can I just say, this is my second day with MES. I was on the student advisory yesterday, and I was with Dr. Faust in his office.
Really?
Yeah. So I appreciate your perspective 2 days
Oh,
in
you
a
were
row.
the person who was like in his office.
I was that person at the table. Yeah. I'm just saying, I'm getting 2 days of this girl, and I think it's great.
There you go.
So thank you.
Wonderful. All right, so let's look, since we're starting with draft 3, so let's look at first semester. We've heard comments around October the 24th, and we'll revisit that as to whether we want that to be a full day or a half day. Anything else on that first semester that we want to take a second look at?
Can I ask
Yes, sir.
just a structural question? Because I guess I'm having a little trouble wrapping my brain around it. So the calendar has to have 215 teacher days in it, right? 10 of those are annual leave days, 12 of them are holidays. And then you have to have a minimum of 10 instructional work days, 2 of which have to be undesignated to allow teachers the opportunity to use their vacation leave. I'm a little concerned about how we got from a minimum of 10 to more than double that with 22. That seems like a lot of teacher work days. And I'm not saying that it's not valuable time, but stacking 2 weeks of them before school starts, I would struggle to find out how to make that time worthwhile, because professional development is best done over a course of time. And if you power them all with it at the beginning, I'm just struggling how we ended up with double what every other district in the state does.
So there are districts that have calendars that are very similar to this, but I definitely hear your points. They're very valid points. What drives the teacher work days to be either at the beginning or the end are very honestly where the semester ends. I mean, you really have very few options. Once you've kind of made that commitment to end before the December, then, you know, to meet the requirements of not starting earlier than the law allows, then you end up front loading or putting it on the back end. For us, there has been benefit to having an increased number of days on the front end, because for us as a district, we've brought in brand new curriculums. You know, it was supposed to support our letters training this year, which unfortunately, because of an issue with the state and not having that contract in place, we weren't able to do. But that ends up being the driver for that.
So that's, and professional development is a good rationale, but we have 5 times the undesignated work days that other districts that we're required to have. So how are we saying that we need that for professional development time, but then giving 10 opportunities for undesignated work days instead of the normal 2?
So with undesignated work days on the calendar, that does not preclude building level principals from designating those days at their school site. With a designated day in the calendar, that designates it for all K-12 school employees, because it's on the district calendar. But say, for instance, if it's required training for K-5 teachers or kindergarten teachers or pre-K teachers, those principals designate those days. So even though it shows up on our district calendar as undesignated, it may be a designated day specific to that school, specific to that grade level, specific to that content area.
They just keep up with the 2 days that they didn't designate? Like, how do we make sure that they had the 2 that they were undesignated? Truly undesignated.
So I would defer to our payroll folks in terms of that, or either our principals to speak to how they ensure that their teachers are able to take 2 work days. You know, this calendar adheres to the calendar of law, but principals are the ones that sign the request for leave.
If I was a principal, that would make me a little uncomfortable. What's that like on the school level? Is that pretty common? Is that normal? Because if you want to say, I'm sorry, these 5 you can't take, does that get blowback from teachers?
I mean, teachers are given the calendar well in advance, so they know what the designated and undesignated days are.
Right, but the law says that you can turn undesignated into designated with your school improvement team.
Right.
Has that happened in the past?
Well, for instance, we're doing that right now with the letters training. There are 3 undesignated days in January, one of which is now going to be designated, so the teachers can take part in that virtual face-to-face.
So how's that going over?
I mean, we've had a couple teachers that did say, well, what if we already had a trip planned?
Right.
You know, and we'll have to work through those individual situations as needed. But overall, me personally, did not get a whole lot of pushback. That's not where they're pushing back. They're pushing back on the 157 hours.
Of the course requirements.
Yeah.
But
They
we
don't
also
mind a designated
can't,
day.
because this is training done by DPI, we don't get to do it ourselves. I mean, it's, like you're sitting there watching them tell us what to do, right? I mean, help us, support us in instruction. So are we gonna be able to front load those all for these empty holes that I mean.
Well, that was the
I-
conversation we were having earlier.
I see the value in teacher work days. I don't want to be the demon who doesn't, but it just seems like more than doubling the minimum at the sacrifice of student days. I don't understand how we are instructionally making that decision. And we voted. I lost. I'm just really curious how we're proving to our community and our students and our parents that an instructional day is not as important as a teacher work day. Because that's what this calendar is saying to me, at least.
Okay, yes.
I won't say it this time. I'm not gonna add the little, what is it, intro. But speaking, nope, did it again. Speaking as a student,
I thought you were a
I-
teacher, by the way, when I sat down. For like the first 5 minutes, I'm like, I bet she's a new teacher. How did she get here?
nope, just Isaac Bear. Speaking from the perspective of a student, I genuinely get the need of teacher work because oh my gosh, you guys' job is hard. I realized it and I knew it and I understood like Teacher Appreciation Week, like I did, but then this happened and now, yeah, you guys have a really hard job. And so those teacher work days aren't even necessarily a break for teachers. Because if teachers are burnt out, like let's just start there, a student's not gonna benefit at all. Like we can tell when a teacher's burnt out and tired. A lot of teachers also verbalize as you get older, they are burnt out and tired.
Amen, yeah.
And you can just tell, and it's not a great atmosphere to be in because you feel kind of bad about it because there's not much you can do. Teachers need time. But then also, professional development is really important for teachers because it helps them be better instructors for us. So that also is, personally, I think, a really great use of time. And then also having those days where we don't necessarily have class because we put teachers and students on a pedestal, I think, a lot of the time, and we forget that we're human, and we really do need breaks at time because we can keep pushing and pushing, right? Like, I'm applying to 26 schools right now, and I can't stand myself for it because I can't keep pushing like this. And I realized that today, like, I need a break, regardless of if I keep pushing and I keep giving myself additional time, nothing productive is going to come out of that time. And I think we'll end up seeing that in the scores if we were to say, take out those teacher work days, because they benefit teachers because you aren't necessarily having to be as hands-on with students, even though you are still working. And then students are able to get that time to just be a kid, because we really don't get as much of that as we probably should, in a sense, if that makes sense.
You
Again,
have me-
as a student.
You know, you were actually
You have me
making,
almost
up until the
everywhere.
end, you were making a great argument for not breaking at Christmas break. To give the break for teachers, to do all that. I mean, the
My
PD's for that.
point
You were
is, I
giving a
think
good
you're right
argument.
in that,
Yes.
but the only thing is, you will never be able to convince me this calendar will help prevent teacher burnout.
Oh,
Because you
definitely
can't-
not. Like,
You can't
yeah.
save up feelings of relaxation for this long haul in the
Right.
middle of the semester.
Yes.
You know, this isn't a teacher burnout calendar, it's just not.
But it's virtually impossible with the time or restrictions that we have on the said calendar to prevent it, because we aren't able to start earlier, right? So since we don't have that earlier start time, and we really do see the benefit of ending in December, like, that long haul is going to happen, and there's nothing we can do to stop it. Students are aware of it, and a lot of teachers are aware of it. But there's not much that we can do at our level to stop. Let me stop talking as if I'm like here. There's not a lot that you guys can do to really stop that. It's bound to happen, but the least we can do is minimize it as much as possible.
I will
know?
tell you, when you want to become a teacher, you come and see me directly.
All right, I know that we had allotted 1 hour for this meeting. We definitely have gone over. And if you're able to stay, I would greatly appreciate that, because I'd love for us to continue this conversation. If you're not able to stay, then we surely can table and reschedule and have a follow-up meeting so that we can continue the conversation in regards to the calendar.
You had stated earlier that a lot of schools have this calendar. Did we look at the Big 12 and see what calendars they're proposing so we could sort of get the feel for those schools that are ending before and what they're doing with their work days?
So I've looked at other calendars in the past. I don't know what the 21-22 calendar proposals are. I haven't seen those, but I think Cumberland is one that follows this calendar, and I'm not sure which other Big 12. I know it's not all of them. It's not, the majority definitely don't.
Because I know that this may be the first year, it might have been last year, that 26th thing kicked us to the after Monday rather than the earlier Monday. I just wonder how other schools like ours, size, demographics, and whatever, are responding to the same problem that we must be having.
Can I ask a question real quick?
Sure.
Specifically, Mary Paul, when we got the first draft calendar, did you informally or formally, however, survey your teachers on that first semester as far as not having the break but still being able to end before the holidays?
Well, I mean, that's in the general discussion, that teachers like the semester ending before. Mr. Brown's here can attest that teachers like it to end before,
So at the
Christmas break.
expense of not having work days built
Right.
throughout?
You're either gonna sacrifice that, or you're gonna sacrifice the grades. Because in high school, you teach these kids all the way down to December the 22nd, send them home for 2 weeks. You might as well not have taught them the stuff before that, because that is not on their mind at all. That has lowered our test scores across the board, because they're not gonna remember it, and you don't have enough time to come back and cram this stuff back in. They weren't even thinking about that stuff when they were home over the holidays.
All right, so I think the general consensus is that we want to come back and meet again, and finish this up. All right, so we will look for another, calendar date, that we can turn around fairly quickly, and invite you guys back. And I appreciate you being here this evening.
So, Dr. Smith, whenever we come back, can we have the number of students who are participating in CCP?
Yeah, and I probably could have texted Al while I was here. Yes. And asked that question.
Does that mean we're allowed to freely share it with vendors?
Yes, as long as we have that